Ja, hallo liebe Adventure Treff Zuhörer. Lange gab es keinen Podcast, das wird mit dieser Episode jetzt mal geändert, denn wir sind ja alle größtenteils zu Hause und was gibt es da Besseres, als dem ein oder anderen Podcast zu lauschen. Unser Podcast heute ist eine Veröffentlichung, die es bereits auf YouTube gibt. Wir haben nämlich mit Charles Cecil gesprochen. Im April 2020 gaben wir unserer Foren-Community die Möglichkeit, Charles Cecil Fragen zu stellen. Charles Cecil, für diejenigen, die ihn nicht kennen, ist der Schöpfer von Spielen wie Baphomets Fluch und Beneath the Steel Sky. Demnächst veröffentlicht er den zweiten Teil von Beneath the Steel Sky mit dem Namen Beyond the Steel Sky. Und da haben wir mit ihm natürlich drüber gesprochen, aber natürlich auch über den heiß erwarteten sechsten Teil von Baphomets Fluch. All das erfahrt ihr in dem kommenden Interview, das ihr bei Bedarf auch auf YouTube finden könnt. Das Interview selber ist in Englisch gehalten, aber Charles hat eine sehr, sehr deutliche Aussprache und ich denke, jeder, der des Englischen ein bisschen mächtig ist, wird sehr gut mitbekommen, was er uns alles Spannendes zu erzählen hat. Long story short, wir beginnen hier mit dem Interview jetzt.
Adventure Treff, der Podcast.
Charles Cecil, creator of such games like Love the Temptress, Broken Sword, Beneath the Steel Sky, and of course the upcoming Beyond the Steel Sky, will answer your questions. Heute beantwortet Charles Cecil die Fragen, die ihr ihm in unserer Community gestellt habt. Mit mir dabei ist mein Kollege Jan Schneider und natürlich Charles Cecil himself. Schönen guten Abend, Charles.
Guten Abend. Wie geht es Ihnen?
That's you are like a German. Yeah, perfect. Awesome.
Dankeschön. Ich habe kleine Deutsch gelernt.
Okay, let's get right to it. Garrett and Much want to know, how is your company and your family performing during times of COVID-19?
I'm delighted to say that the family and all our team are doing well and there's no illness. So, fingers crossed. But it is very strange, and both Germany and the UK have been quite badly hit, and we hope and offer our best wishes to everybody and hope that it all ends very soon, I guess.
How is your company actually performing in times of COVID-19? Does it have any influences?
Do you know what? 6 months ago, it would have been terrible, but we're reaching, we're not far off now for Beyond the Steel Sky. And we encouraged and then had to ask people to work from home. I'm still working from the studio because I can walk in, and but there's nobody else, and so I have lots of space, and that's lovely. And people are working from home very efficiently. It's what I guess Scrum was always designed to have remote teams, and every morning we have a Scrum meeting, and it's actually not affected us too badly at all so far. And let's just hope. Obviously, if team members get ill, that would be profound, but as it stands, thankfully we're very lucky in that it's not affecting us too badly, and our team is very European. Am I allowed to talk about European? When I say European, I mean, of course, it's the English way. It's the rest of Europe. But our producer is Norwegian, and he's in Norway, and our CTO is Dutch. He's in the Netherlands. Our one of the lead technical art guys is in Rome. So we were always geared to having people all over Europe in particular working from home offices. So that is what we were set up to. That was the way that we set up to work.
So you are able to work on your current release, which is Beyond a Steel Sky, the pretty much second part to Beneath a Steel Sky. And of course, a lot of our community members have a lot of different questions. And the one we always hear, and I'm not sure if we can get an answer from you, is how long do we still have to wait for the release of Beyond the Steel Sky? And especially for Apple Arcade and PC.
Okay, well, that's a really good question. And what I've fallen into the trap so often of saying it's going to take this amount of time, and then it doesn't. So we are not far off. We're not far off. There are a good few weeks, but it's not a very long time. And I'm loath to say any more than that, only because once I commit, then people measure it and then get frustrated and disappointed if we don't hit it. So we're reasonably close.
We all know that the last 10% are always the hardest.
Yes, I know. Well, we're definitely well into the last 10%. I think what they said, well, I remember when I started in development back in the very early 80s, the expression was that the first 80% takes 80% of the time. The last 20% takes another 80%. So that was the way it works.
Haremhub wants to know, will there be a DRM-free version of Beyond the Steel Sky on GOG?
I would think so. Yes, we're great fans of GOG, and we totally respect the fact that a lot of people really like DRM-free, and completely understand that. So yeah, I would imagine that we will. We don't have a plan substantially at the moment, but I would imagine yes.
And there's another platform question from Lupa, and Lupa wants to know, will there probably be Beyond the Steel Sky, or probably even Beneath the Steel Sky? Will there probably be a port for the PlayStation 4?
Yeah, interesting question. Will we get Beneath the Steel Sky on other platforms?
Well, the answer is absolutely yes. Yeah, I don't know when, but we are blessed with a fantastic community on console, and so yeah, no, absolutely yes.
Will there be German voiceovers for Beyond the Steel Sky? Is that already confirmed?
Well, there would be, and there will be. Now, the problem is with coronavirus, I mean, this sounds like me being a politician, but with coronavirus, it's actually very difficult. Actors are unable to get into the studio. So this is actually a really, really good question. Of course, there will be. It would be unthinkable not to release the game with German voice, full German voice. But from a logistical perspective, we don't actually know when we will be able to deliver that.
There will probably be an update or something like that. That will probably come out.
That's exactly what that might have to be the situation, which doesn't make me comfortable at all. But I think under the circumstances, hopefully people would understand that we're totally committed to our German audience, and we absolutely would, if we could, have German voices, but it might have to wait.
Have the English voices already been recorded?
Yes. Because the way that it works always is that when we record into other languages, what people want is they want to be able to hear the English, because then they get the context for it. So we'll always record English first, and in parallel do the translations. And once the English is cut up and normalized and everything's been tested and approved, that's normally when other languages will be recorded. But that was the point at which coronavirus hit and stopped us in our tracks. It's just unfortunate, and if it comes to it, then we just have to beg forgiveness and say that really high quality German audio will be coming very soon.
Another thing that a lot of Germans still have passion about are boxes for games.
Oh, I love boxes. Do you know, I'm old enough to remember. I remember Ultima 7. Opening up Ultima 7, and inside there were stones, there were cloth maps, there was just wonderful, wonderful things, and I so miss it. We did 5 years ago for the Revolution's 25th anniversary. We actually did a box that was full of really cool things. It had, Broken Sword USB stick, it had music, DVDs, it had posters, it had other things that I've forgotten about, and it was sort of quite small and compact. And it was just joyful, and that's absolutely. I love boxes as well, and we will definitely do a box. There's absolutely no question at all.
For Beyond the Steel Sky.
Yes. No, boxes are great, aren't they? Do you know a friend of mine, Jochen? He came to stay with us, and he brought an LP, an album by Kraftwerk, and I hadn't opened an LP for probably 25 years. And I opened this thing, and it was nice, and it was big, and it had beautiful imagery. And inside the sleeve was a description, big description of all the band members. And I just remembered the joy of what that used to be like. And then something went wrong in the mid-90s. And instead of boxes full of wonderful things, what publishers did, I think it was the move to CD, is, if you remember, suddenly they just put a CD, a bit of cardboard to hold the CD, and that was it. And everything was then put digitally on the CD, and a lot was lost when that happened.
There were a couple of games which had a CD version and a floppy version in the same box. I would suggest to put Beneath the Steel Sky on a floppy in the box.
But you know that Beneath the Steel Sky released on Amiga, and I think it was 16 floppy disks. It was insane, and nobody complained. And the CD32 had just come out, so we recorded the voices, and it all went on, and we had this sort of wonderful thing. We had, the CD player, and everybody thought, when if you think, 20, 25 years ago, there were many things that we looked into the future and we knew would happen. We knew there would be flying cars. We knew there would be skateboards, hoverboards that went around. But the two things that I would never, ever have predicted in my wildest dreams is that kids would still be going into record shops and getting LPs and buying them. And secondly, that people would be smoking cigarettes that glowed blue at the end. Those two, we would never have seen that coming.
Another general question from Much about boxes. When do box releases make sense in your eyes? Or is digital the only way to go now?
I think as special boxes, absolutely. I think releasing a box at the same time as digital that goes into retail is harder to justify. But like in so many things in life, Germany leads the way, and and I think
you're amazing, Charles.
we have the Germans to thank for the fact that one, adventures are so popular still around the world, and two, that the boxes are really popular. And I have to say, you are also, as a country, propping up the magazine industry as well, because you've got so many successful magazines that are still strong compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah, people are still carrying slips of paper to their bank branch to make a bank transfer.
Really?
I've just put down a few questions about Beyond the Steel Sky, because that's clearly the next big thing. One question I had was that, fan favorite has always been Joey. So I guess it's fair to say that he'll be back in one form or another and beyond.
That's a really good question. So should I answer that one first?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Well, what we did was, when we first started planning, is we wanted to write a game that, one, absolutely appealed to fans of Beneath the Steel Sky, but secondly, could be played by somebody who knew nothing about the game, and so they could play it as a standalone. So all of the information that you need about the original is peppered in with the rest of the new game, Beyond the Steel Sky. But certainly we sat down and we tried to work out what we thought fans would really want. And the first one was, of course, the relationship between Foster and Joey. Secondly was to go back to Union City and to see it in full 3D in its glory. And I hope if you've managed to play the game, you'll see that actually it does look really nice in the city at the moment. And to have both a sense of familiarity, but also the sense that there's so much new, and to get that combination. So that's a very long way of answering your question, which is, yes, Joey is a very important part of this game.
Yeah, will we see other characters or maybe locations within Union City that fans from the first part still remember?
We will, and it would be a big spoiler to say too much, but there will be characters that make a reappearance, and there will be locations that make a reappearance as well. They look great, actually, I have to say. But as I keep saying, you don't need to have played the original game to really enjoy this one.
Yeah, you mentioned the look. So if you played the demo, it's noticeable that it's got a very unique 3D look. It is 3D. It did remind me a little bit of Borderlands from the look, but it still has its own very character. Can you talk a bit about the process that made you find this look?
Yes, of course. So, I mean, we are great fans of Borderlands. The technology is quite different. What I was keen to do is, when I look back over the original Beneath the Steel Sky, the Virgin marketing was that it was an interactive comic book. Now, I think that that probably bears absolutely no truth whatsoever, in that it wasn't an interactive comic. It didn't look like a comic book. But what did strike me was that there is something very appealing about a comic book look, because obviously in an adventure game, you spend time looking around the environment, looking for hotspots, looking for things that are going to be useful within the game, probably more so than any other genre. So by creating a style that very much fitted within Dave Gibbons's comic book style, we could also, I felt, enhance the gameplay by creating this sort of toon look, which made the backgrounds easier to scan and the things that are relevant more obvious. So the way that we do it is a post processor, whereby very much bringing forward what we did from cell shading, which is where you use ink and paint. So you an animator will draw the line. That line will then be colored to be a darker version of whatever the paint on the inside is. And what we were aiming to do was to create something that used ink and paint from cartoons, but looked more like a comic book. So, for example, the lines are not dark black; they're just darker versions of whatever the the color that the ink is going to be. And we then worked with Dave, and we tried to see how far we could push it. At one point, we actually had cross-hatching, because my objective was that the game, any frame of the game, would look like it could have come from a comic book still. And so we tried cross-hatching and all of those things. And as a still, it looked great. But as you animated, all the cross-hatching got in the way, and it came to dominate the imagery. So we very deliberately went to create something that, as I say, would feel like a comic book, but in an interactive and in a full 3D world. And broadly, I'm quite pleased with what we've come up with, and so far the response to it's been very good.
Yeah, it's great to see you working with Dave Gibbons again. Obviously, the most known as the artist behind Watchmen.
Dave is great. The funny thing is that he sent me a copy of a fax that he'd sent back in 1995, which is called Beneath the Steel Sky 2. So we've been talking about a sequel now for 25 years. But the big difference, of course, is that the ability to self-publish, the ability to work with publishers on a more equitable basis, because we have direct relationships with our community, all of these things has made it feasible in a way that it wouldn't have been, up until quite recently.
Yeah, was he happy to be involved in a 3D project? I don't know if he's known for 3D work.
Dave is great. He keeps saying that it looks every bit as, if not a lot better than he ever imagined it to be. He's been a huge fan. Dave's a terrific collaborator. He designed all our characters. From the original game, he even went further, and we gave him an Amiga and D-Paint 3, and he actually created some of the characters himself. And he got really excited. He described it as like a mosaic where you use very subtle color changes to suggest things. From a 3D perspective, I mean, his son Dan is a gamer. He's not. Dave's not. I think he was very receptive, but he's been really he's contributed enormously. But he's always been very enthusiastic and very encouraging in the way that he's given his feedback about the game and the way it looks. The
demo shows that you're again putting a lot of emphasis on puzzles. It's not just a pure narrative game. There are lots of puzzles in there, and some unusual ones even. Was it hard to resist the urge to go to a less puzzle-driven gameplay like Telltale did, or Life is Strange, for example?
I love Telltale, and I really love Life is Strange. I think Don't Nod are fantastic. Yeah. What this is, right from the very beginning, we were saying this is unashamedly an adventure game. These are puzzles that people will come to recognize. You have an inventory, you use inventory objects. But what I wanted to do was pull that up slightly and to have a base to give a wider range of puzzle opportunities. So our very first game was called Lure of the Temptress, and in Lure of the Temptress we had we created something that at the time felt very revolutionary called virtual theatre, and that was that characters would walk around the world talking to each other, swapping ideas, and it felt very dynamic. The problem in 2D was that when a character walked off the screen, then they were effectively lost until they resurfaced later. So if you needed to find someone, you could spend your time wandering around and keeping missing them, which was frustrating. And the other element that we used in Lure of the Temptress was the idea that you could give commands to one of your helpers, to your helper, called Rat Pouch. So you could string together, tell Rat Pouch to go to this room, and it'd give you a list of the rooms that you visited or seen and it would give you a list of the items that you knew existed in that world. So it felt very dynamic. The problem was that very quickly I discovered that you'd give tasks to Rat Pouch that you couldn't do as yourself. And the problem with that was that we kept on having to come up with reasons why you couldn't do them yourself. So in the first one, which worked very well, there's a Skull, which is like an orc, and you can't get past him, but Rat Pouch can, so you send him off and you do that. And then we went, oh yes, he's burnt his arm, so he can't push the wall, tell Rat Pouch to do it. But very quickly we ran out of things to tell him to do. And that meant that when we wrote our second game, which was the original Beneath the Steel Sky, there was actually a lot less virtual theatre. But there is one character called Gilbert Lamb, who's a Yorkshireman, and he's very proud of the fact that the last 5 beavers in the world made his coat. And I think it's very unfair, by the way, that Yorkshire folk get such a hard time. Since I live in York, which is at the heart of Yorkshire, I have to be a little bit careful about these things. But hopefully none of this will leak out to my compatriots out there. Anyway, so with Beneath the Steel Sky, Lamb follows a route. He goes he visits his factory and then gets the elevator, and as long as he's got approval, he goes down, goes to his apartment. And I was very proud of one of the puzzles that we had, which is whereby you can subvert the system and you can stop him having authority, which means that he gives you his card, and then that opens up an opportunity, which felt very dynamic to me. So what I did when we first started is I looked back at the puzzles that I thought worked really well, and that one felt like a very fresh and a dynamic setup for a puzzle. So what we've done is we've reintroduced virtual theatre, the idea that characters walk around, so you can sit and just watch the world go by. But those characters respond to the player character, but also to the world. So we give you the opportunity to go in and hack the systems. And by hacking the systems, the world changes, often unexpectedly, for those secondary characters, those non-player characters, and they will then respond. So we can then layer puzzles on top of these building blocks, which gives us extra dimensions. And in many ways, the solutions then emerge from the behavior of characters, rather than just simply the world being in a stasis and responding directly to player actions. So, what I wanted to get away from was the idea that, that the barman just sits there, does a looped animation, and when you come to do something, then they will respond. I wanted something that felt a bit more dynamic, which was very much looking back to our virtual theatre and the ideas that we explored, and I always felt disappointed that we didn't carry forward.
Yeah, so one thing that you also do is to have puzzles with multiple solutions, which is something you don't see a lot in adventure games these days. I think that's somehow connected to the virtual theatre idea.
Well, yes, so the idea for that was that instead of having multiple solutions where each one is hand-coded, what we have a solution that the player must work out. But because of the virtual theatre and because of the hacking, you have multiple ways that you can actually achieve it. So it is a system, but you have a choice on how you want to approach it, and that's really what it is. Because of course you can put in multiple solutions, you can hardwire them, you can design them, and that's fine. But the player only really gets to experience one unless they play the game multiple times. And what I hope that people will feel when they play this game is that there were multiple solutions. They chose the one that suited them. And it wasn't that we hard-coded multiple solutions. It's that one answer emerged from one set of behavior, and had the player done something else, another would have done. But that's not to say that decisions don't affect things. So there are several decision points which have a profound effect on the ending and measure the way the player is choosing to play the game, and in particular, how they're choosing to interact with people. And that means that as the game progresses, so that then comes and it affects the way that those characters behave at the climactic points.
There are multiple endings to this story.
No. I'm a great believer that coming up with one ending is really tough. And the idea that you can come up with 4 or 5, I think is totally, well, I don't believe it. And I think the big problem is that you'll come up with one ending which hopefully is good and it is canon and it ties up all the loose ends. I mean, if you want to have a profound story, then the idea of having 4 or 5, I think, is ludicrous. So what we're saying is that there is one ending, but the way that those characters deliver the ending changes based on the way that you've behaved earlier in the game.
So one thing that I'm also curious about a little bit, which is also special in Beyond the Steel Sky, is the dialogue system. There are things like the different dialogue options can have different colors. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yes, yeah. Well, so the version that you played is not been tidied up. So often elements that should disappear don't, and things that don't. So what we've decided, and we've very much taken this from the RPG genre, is the idea of a golden thread. And the golden thread allows players, I mean, personally, I would turn it off. It's not something that I'd want to do, but there is clearly a demand for it. And that is indicating to the player what they need to talk about in order to progress. And we do have quite a sophisticated system. It indicates when new topics have been made available. It indicates when topics are exhausted. And as I say, if you choose to turn it on, it'll give you the golden thread as well, which will allow you to talk about only the things that are vital rather than the world building around it.
So, but this will be an option. So if people say, I don't, okay.
We also have an option to turn the hints off as well. Because, of course, as designers, we go, well, people shouldn't need hints. And hopefully people won't need the hints because as they explore the world, I mean, one of the things about point-and-click adventures, of course, is that, you know, particularly the old ones were based on slapstick solutions, which you kind of encountered by trying multiple solutions and eventually stumbled on a solution. What we hope in this game is that by exploring, you will learn more and more about the world and more about the characters. And so the solution to the puzzle will become clearer. So that will encourage players to explore the world rather than just to go and look up the solution.
So as far as I have seen, there's also a time trigger for each new hint, correct?
Yes, and it's much too long at the moment. So this is all stuff that we're exploring, and we'll be getting testers in to game testers in to come and tell us their thoughts. So I mean, I'll tell you what would be lovely would be to maybe separate to this is to get a poll on what people really think, how they choose to play adventure games, modern adventure games. I'd love to get some thoughts from your readers.
Oh yeah, okay. We can do a poll. Why not?
Fantastic.
Good idea. Okay.
Thank you.
I have another question about the world building aspect, and it felt always that Beneath the Steel Sky did a lot of world building, and it created this whole socio-economic backdrop and had a lot of politics going on in the background without getting too much into the way of the narrative. But it felt always like you wanted to tell more stories within this world, and almost as if you got a bit sidetracked by Broken Sword and probably the success of Broken Sword. Is there something to it, or was it always meant to be a standalone game in the first place?
I think it was always meant to be a standalone game. We were lucky. Dave drew some extra characters, some of which might make a comeback, in the comic book. And what was great was that the comic book told a big side of the story, but then we also had a security manual. And the security manual kind of hinted at things that were going on outside the game itself. And that was really important because it made players feel that the world was so much bigger than what we actually showed. And that's really important. That was one of the things that we identified as being really important for Beyond a Steel Sky, certainly.
How important is it for you that your games have some meaning beyond the story they're telling?
Enormously. It would be incredibly pretentious to say this, but you look at 1984 and how meaningful, even to today, how extraordinary 1984 is. And then, of course, you look at Terry Gilliam's masterpiece, Brazil, which was originally going to be called 1984 and a half. And I think it probably would have been a more appropriate name than Brazil. I don't know why he didn't call it that. So I really hope, in the way that Beneath a Steel Sky was reflecting society as it was in the early 90s, Margaret Thatcher had changed everything. Half of the UK thought she was fantastic. The other half thought that she was dreadful. But she was coming up with statements like, society is dead. It's all about families and individuals. And she profoundly changed the way that we viewed ourselves, in some ways for the better, some ways for the worse. And currently the world is going through very, very strange times. And I don't mean the coronavirus. I mean, before that, big changes again, particularly since up until now, the world has just got richer and richer, and it's likely to go into decline. So there are key, big, important questions that need to be asked. And as I say, without trying to avoid being too pretentious, I take an enormous amount of inspiration from 1984, George Orwell's classic novel. But from a humorous perspective, I really like the fact that Terry Gilliam took that and wrote Brazil, which is a brilliant film. And in many ways, we take a lot of inspiration from that, the juxtaposition, as we did first time around, the juxtaposition between the humor and the seriousness, so that you're not quite sure whether you're meant to be gasping or laughing. But always underpinned by a serious narrative on retrospectively looking back into society. So I hope that when people finish the game, that they will appreciate and accept that is what we managed to do.
Could you argue that the Beneath a Steel Sky series is more the series that looks on society in terms of how we develop in the future, and that Broken Sword is more a look like in the past because it's more researched in more archaeologistic way of looking at things? So would this be a description that you would go with, or?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have thought of it myself, but I think you're absolutely right. And thank you. Yeah, no, very much so. So Beneath the Steel Sky, of course, is set in the future. So therefore, it needs to reflect what we are excited about and what we're fearful of the future. Clearly, elements like social credits in China, which are profoundly important in the way that the Chinese are deciding that they want to control the behavior of people, ultimately to make them happier. But then again, what is happiness? How do you define happiness? How do you make people, how do you nudge people to be happy and give them self-determination and free will? These are all things that we explore.
We need to ask you some questions about Broken Sword, obviously, and Mario TK wants to know, if there is another Broken Sword, do you consider revisiting old places like Paris, or probably even consider new places like places in Germany?
Yes, it's ridiculous, and there will absolutely be a new Broken Sword soon. It's something that I'm in the process of. Ideas are going around. I've got some really nice ideas. I promise you it'll be really good. And of course we'll come to Germany because, Germany's got such an extraordinary, it's got so many wonderful old castles, and it's got, an amazing medieval history. Wolfram von Eschenbach, of course, from Eschenbach, which I believe is in Bavaria, wrote a very interesting poem called Parzival. And I'm particularly intrigued by that. So, yes, of course, we'll come to Germany because there are so many good reasons to do so.
And now that you have developed this new comic style look in Beneath the Steel Sky 2, or Beyond the Steel Sky, sorry, with the Unreal Engine, is this something you would be willing to looking at? Or would you say...
Well, I haven't decided, but I think that people love the control system of of Broken Sword, stroke Baphomets Fluch. And I currently think that we should stick to the same general look, use technology absolutely as aggressively, as ambitiously as we can. But I am loath to change the formula too much and have no expectation of doing so.
And the last question comes from Match, and it's pretty simple. A personal one, but not too personal. Do you and your friends actually still like playing adventure games?
Very much so. And but when I say adventure games, I would cover the broad gamut of adventures. So yes, of course, we love point and click. I was playing Black Sad. In fact, I started playing Black Sad at the wonderful Adventure Treff party in August. And now it's out, and I've enjoyed playing that, which is great. I'm not sure if you'd include Untitled Goose Game as an adventure. It's kind of like an adventure in that you wander around the world causing chaos. That was the last game I played and started playing again because I loved it. But then, you know, the her stories and it's such an incredible genre. So yeah, no, very much so. And it's a privilege to be still writing games. I mean, I actually wrote my first game in 1981. So it's coming up to 40 years, which is terrifying, isn't it? And
for us.
And I'm aware that it's a huge privilege to still be writing adventure games after all this time. And you know, sometimes people ask me what excites me the most, and it's undoubtedly it's the passion that people have for the stories and the way they're told, and the puzzles. And often people remember playing with friends or playing with loved ones, and their relationship is very much defined by the fact that people were solving puzzles together, and in doing so driving the narrative forward. And adventure games mean an awful lot to an awful lot of people, and it's as I say, it's a huge privilege to still be able to write them for fans of adventures.
And Charles, it was a huge privilege for us to talk to you and feel your passion for creating these great adventure games. We're really looking forward to Beyond the Steel Sky. Thank you so much for answering our questions. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören und wie immer bis zum nächsten Mal. Wer übrigens an den Umfragen teilnehmen möchte, die Charles Cecil im Interview angesprochen hat, die findet ihr jetzt bei uns im Interviewforum. Alle Details dazu einfach im Feature nachsehen. Das findet ihr unter dem Titel Eure und unsere Fragen an Charles Cecil unter www.adventure-treff.de. Bis bald!
Afford its membership fees. You can't imagine that it all costs a little more, but there's more than that to be whole. When I learned how to read, I thought that education would set me free, but learning a language won't change your pedigree, and no one likes the purebred mixing company. You can't imagine that it all costs a little more, but there's more than that to being poor. One, two, ready, go. my cheap shoes I'm burning with something to prove. There's a number 2 pencil writing verses on my sheets.